So, again, to optimize our Q&A process, questions will be taken from me to you website. First question goes to Alexander Shakhnovich, and the question is like this. Just 1 second. Are there any plans to adopt ISO 12436 in Kazakhstan, and if yes, then when? Yes, the standard is going to be adopted in Kazakhstan. There were some difficulties with it because the standardization committee doesn't review the standards that are under development right now. After the standard is adopted by ISO, then application is submitted to Kazakhstan, and now this process is underway. Probably by the end of the year it will come into effect. Thank you. Second question is for Benava. Do you use BIM 360 design and field? What is your time allocation? Do you do all the process in design, construction and design in parallel, or one after another? So first question is design and field and construction in parallel or consecutively. Let me clarify if you do not understand. In our working documentation, it's in parallel. These processes are in parallel. Thomas, please. Probably you would be the right person to answer the question. Elizabeth, maybe you. So first, do you use design and field?
Yes. So I can answer for the field part, as that is something that we are rolling out at the moment, and that is another project that has to be done after we are live in docs. So we didn't want to do too much at the same time when we implemented docs. So now we are looking at what the sites need, how they would like to view their models, and also looking at the checklists and issues for quality checks and so on. And for the design part, I think I will hand over to Elizabeth, our PAM.
Yes, we are using BIM even for design parts, and we've been doing it for quite a while, and we're using all available latest tools from Autodesk that helps both designers but also project managers to check the projects, to have insight in the project during design, and we are using also some part for collaboration in Revit, of course, and whatever is available of the tools that Autodesk provides. So yes, absolutely we use it.
Спасибо. И вот второй вопрос.
Okay, and the second question about processes. I mean, not in Russia, but in Sweden. Design and construction, are they in parallel or one after another? When you design something, you start building, right? Or how do you do this?
Hopefully we design first and build them afterwards. That's what I would say that's the usual way. And we hope not need to have so much changes during the building process. Everyone knows that it's not a good way of doing the project. So we try really to design ready-made drawings, so everything is actually as much as possible ready. We're also selling apartments to customers, so before we can sell, we need to know what we sell exactly. So that's also a good reason to have it done ready before you start to build.
Okay, спасибо.
Thank you. Now, question to Donatas. What about operation? Buildings and structures. I represent operating company. What about building operation using BIM? Do you have any results? How to? Well, come to Lithuania, to Vilnius. I'll show you the results. Well, there are some results. That's good already. Now, question to Irina. Model requirement for expert review. Why do you need this requirement for IOS model with V-load about 300, which is much higher than is stipulated by the current legislation? Yes, if you have a close look at this document, you will see that in load 300, it's not about information model for engineering system. Nload isn't used anywhere. And we suggest the following document iterations. In the following document iterations, just to remove it at all. We don't use loads. I can tell it right off. So we don't really care about them. There is a table in a document which sets out modeling requirements for different elements. Thank you. Alexander. Statement of work in Kazakhstan. Because how do you do statement of work? Because you often use foreign, internationally built equipment. Well, there is a classifier for materials and equipment items. It has a hierarchical structure. And if we have a certain international piece of equipment, the supplier of this equipment that brings it to Kazakhstan sends a letter to Ministry of Construction asking to include this item into our database. If this equipment is unique and there is no equipment class for such equipment, then it is included. If there is a class, then the ministry sends a response that it is already there in the database, class such and such. Banava, question to you. Whose classifiers do you use, Russian or international? And how do you deal with classifiers in Banava?
Yes, as you understand, we have 8 different countries. Oh, sorry, can you hear me? Yes. So we actually figure out, or we need to enable different way of classification, and for our common use, so all countries use omni-class as one part of classification, and then each and every country use their own. So we have both common and we needed, of course, to enable country-specific classification systems. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. But we also use this common, so we can kind of compare countries or help countries in between and understand what they are doing.
Спасибо.
Thank you. Donatus. You mentioned inventory listing. Item 6, data exchange. Then the model is populated with data. And what happens next? Who has access to this information? Our main goal was to create a common data environment, to collect the data in real time. If something changes, the data should change. What was the question again? What happens with the model after it is populated with the data? Who has access to the information? Well, it depends on the platform that we are going to use. We use SharePoint in our company. SharePoint has its own users, and we manage access rights to data access rights in our office. On the factory, we are going to program a dedicated software for the employees who have the right to read the data and those who have the right to write the data. Depends on our goal, what we want to achieve. Well, anything is possible these days. We are getting to space soon, so it's very easy to program an app around the database. It's no big deal. It's not a rocket science. Question to Irina Chikovskaya. Are you ready to publish the requirements to information models. Well, I think I answered this question already. On our website, State Expert Review Service, St. Petersburg, there is a dedicated section about information modeling. And there you can access this information. They are in open access, public domain. You have to register first. We did this because if you upload just this data without any registration, there's going to be chaos and data will be distorted. Until now, we received about 50 requests to get this data. That shows that people react to this need. Again, if you need this access, access to this information, please go to our website. The priority is given to St. Petersburg-based companies and designer companies. Well, I can speak for hours about this, but in a nutshell, yes, everything is, all the requirements are on our website. Alexander, are you planning to replace GOST standards for windows and doors and such? That's a good question. We are thinking about replacing not just doors and windows, because a window is a window, but there are names of systems that our designers are not used to. And we are now discussing this issue at Regulatory Development Commission for CIS countries. On one hand, classes of the systems probably should have the names that experts use already. On the other hand, the classifier approach, the idea is to call a system based on its function, call a system by its function. So it's a certain conflict. Do we use the existing approach or systemic approach? I myself for the systemic approach, but there are opponents to this. The decision isn't made. Right now you can just refer to the code and say, write something like air supply system or ventilation system code such and such. I hope that I answered the question. Thank you, Alexander. Panava. A rather obvious question, but could you elaborate on this? Were there any difficulties when you moved to BIM 300 docs? Any challenges? And in general, are there any challenges when you integrate several systems?
Short answer is yes, of course. I mean, it wasn't an easy task to do, and to put it short, one thing that we did was to also migrate all of our archives. So that generated one problem with the huge amount of data and some custom development that we had to do to enable that, so that you wouldn't have an archive in an old system. Second problem or challenge that we had was working with a huge amount of people, because we wanted openness in the model. So in big business units with hundreds of either active or then old projects, we needed to have hundreds and hundreds of users also have access there. So that's where some API limitations came into action, and that was another challenge that needed to be solved, actually together with you at BSS, of course. And then the human factors, of course, having the trainings and so on, but that is something that we can always solve. But there are definitely challenges with the migration and the API, but we got it done in the end quite well.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you. Donatas, how do you use your model during operation with IT system maintenance, energy balance, material balance? What's the functionality? In the cases that I demonstrated only property management, planning, but no maintenance so far. We haven't reached this phase yet. Right now, what's most important for us is to gather all the data from the existing sources, because some data are on paper, some data are somewhere in the computers, and it's important not to lose anything. But on a global level, well, again, it depends on the goals. If the goal is to monitor energy consumption, then we would have a completely different approach to modeling and integrate the estimations, efficiency, analysis. There are different systems and different goals. When you start doing something, think what you need to achieve. Then you will have a better understanding which approach to take. Irina, AFC that is submitted to your expert review, does it need electronic signature or not? What's the legal status of a model? There is no legal status of a model. We know that in the urban planning code, there are some amendments being done into urban planning code, and these amendments make it legitimate, give official status to information models. But right now, digital signature is not required for the models, but if you do this, we will appreciate it. So it's either way. If you want to do this, it's okay. But in the future, the plan is, if this technology is legitimized and adopted as a legal practice, then we will have a requirement to have digital signature. Because the idea is that information model will require some authentication. But that's for the future. Right now, it's not required. But again, in the documents, in the existing documents, there are some requirements about this. If you need additional information, please refer to the documentation. Another question. Common family database for AFC and standards. Are there any plans to do so? Well, we are not going to do so because this is not our area of responsibility. What software? What's AFC? What are we talking about here? If Graphisoft AFC as a model, well, that's can be used by Revit, by other software solutions, but you cannot include families in Autodesk Revit. Why? You don't need it. I don't see the point of exchanging library elements in AFC, just library elements that were created for proprietary formats. They must be verified when you upload them to AFC. That's important. That's what I wanted to say in my presentation. Can I comment also about our format, EFC? It's not capable for data, family data transfer. It's not designed for it. Yes, you are absolutely right. And not just family. Also, the material data sometimes are not transferred. Thank you.
A question to Bonava on BIM 360. What are the processes that have been changed after you turned to BIM 360 docs? Storage structure, probably before that it was not in place. Is there a practical example of a working process? Can you drive an example of that? What actually changed? Before you had Teams, you had advantages and disadvantages when you use docs. What are the advantages now from docs you have?
I guess one clear advantage is, of course, the way we reduce time from the project managers in administering the project. So that is one. But then when you go more into the into the functions of the system, then one key capability that we are trying to launch is the use of issues and the issue workflows in BIM 360 docs. So, for example, for design to be asking comments from calculation about the model, or from production, how the building can be constructed in practice, So that is something that we will be using those capabilities for. And then, of course, the integration with Revit in the design collaboration and the BIM 360 field to have a single source of information for all the documents. And I don't know if Russia would have any practical examples. I will hand over to Daria Trubina.
Добрый день, я могу добавить.
Dear colleagues, a few more comments on the Russian practice of Banava. We are currently using the 360 docs system to store documents, to store documentation for working with models via Revit collaboration, and we're also starting to pilot field instruments, field tools in the BIM 360 docs, and also we try to use some new processes in the new platform. The key modification is that we can manage users, and it's done through a unified portal, through a SharePoint hub, which is quite convenient. At all access levels, we can manage all them in one location to connect users to SharePoint, to BIM 360 docs, and to Microsoft Teams as well. For us, it's a good advantage. It's a good step forward, which actually was a key change after the transition. A question to Alexander Shakhnovich. In Kazakhstan, are there any works on normalizing, on providing regulations for bridges and roads? This is a relevant question. Our institution is not working on this in this area, but there are some major companies who do design and construction of bridges and roads. They're working on a standard in this area, but this is still underway, and the application, the state application, has not been formalized. So there is no current project like that in the pipeline. So this is something that is being an initiative. A question to Donatas. A question on a practical example, on inventory of the general plan of a fabric of a plant with subsoil and undersurface communications. No, this is a brief and very concise answer. A question to Irina. Did you think about disagreements between customers and yourself regarding your requirements? How you treat these conflicts? Of course, it's possible. Our requirements are not that big and are not that major. Thinking about capital construction objects, customers' requirements need to be more scalable. They will be more broad. They need to be broader. Secondly, designers do their work professionally based on the same documents which are used by experts to do their expertise, to do their inspection. So the information we request does not exceed the requirements of regulations. And one more question. An additional material for the inspection, for the expertise. If you conduct paperwork inspection, who is doing documentation for the model itself? It's a good question. This is a headache, not only for our inspection institution and expertise institution. Kazakhstan is also having this problem, and other countries too. The available software effectively does not allow us to link, to provide an exact link between the documents submitted in double D format with the info model itself. And this is related not just with the capability of the software product, rather than with the procedure of submitting documents. You submit documents in the PDF format, which is hard to link to real models and coordinates, and this is the key headache for many of us who will be thinking on how to automate this process. For you to understand Why expertise initially needs an information model? We need this because after modifications are provided to the model, it's much easier to compare those changes after they're integrated. The speed of analysis between the first and second versions of the models is incomparable with conventional routine analysis of documentation in PDF. This is the first comment. The second comment is that there are a number of checks which we can visualize, and if we do that, we can see the pain points of the submitted draft project, and we can identify those problems. And the third point is that it's possible to remove some workload from designers. If an expert has a question about documents, for example, an expert demands an additional section to understand the content of the project. In this case, the model is instrumental. He can load the model and track this area to understand that there are no issues. A proposal, you can do this integration through classifiers. If an IFC model has its tag, and if the document has the same tag, this might be a solution. This might be a way out. Thank you for your comment. We don't do classifiers on purpose. We understand that they are there, they are available. Data cells are always there, but the level of classifiers is not at the same level with the expertise. It's not our scope of responsibility, rather than the scope of responsibility of the state or the customer. This can help various companies, and our colleagues from Bonava told us they have their own classifiers for particular countries. But in St. Petersburg, every customer actually has dedicated classifiers. So we need to test various approaches and to work with it. That's how it's done. One more question to Alexander. Do you check models? Do you check the fit of the models with regulations? And how do you provide inspection of cost sheets and other cost sheet integration to the model? There is not an available solution for that. Now, this is an open question regarding cost sheets. Of course, cost sheets and volumes can be exported, and we can track them down, understanding properties and links within the model. But in terms of regulations, it's not there. We are not investing our resources into it because we are trying to rethink our approach on exporting data from the models, and a lot depends on the classifier we've been discussing today. So probably at our next conference I will report on our track record and on our progress with more practical dimensions. I agree with Alexander. We are not now focusing on the cost sheet base, on the cost sheet part, but we're going to do that next year. But speaking about cost sheet, on working with cost sheets in terms of BIMs, we need to be cautious regarding the modeling method. If we detail the model and drill down to the cost sheet level, of course designers will need more time to submit their project, and that would be a considerable delay. All of us understand that it is an additional workload. I think it's a question we will have a year later. A question to Bonava in English.
Have you considered other cloud-based solutions for document management in BIM, such as Oracle Aconics or ITWO? Since at this point, different BIM 360 solutions, in my view, look confusingly diversified and narrow. So,
I think for us that will be a difficult question to answer. We haven't been in the company for that long, and I haven't seen the process that went into looking at the different cloud solutions back in 2016, and when Autodesk was selected as the main partner. Juri Nikitin here would have a better answer as an applications manager, but basically it was about having an integrated process. So using Autodesk products, you were able to connect to Revit and have all these connected workflows with BIM. I see Juri Nikitin nodding. Do you have anything to add, or? Yes, so that was
nothing to add.
That was the logic behind it, to have kind of one connected process, and with that kind of one supplier can enable that.
Спасибо.
Question to Donatas: how many people did you involve in DOTS processing program and linking it to Maxon? There was just one person involved, just a single person. It resembles Viami, a question and a concise answer. We have 3 minutes to go. If some of you from the audience, from the floor, wants to ask a question, we can pass you the roving mic and you can ask your question to our esteemed speakers. Yes, we have a question from the floor. I need someone to pass the roving mic to that gentleman. I do it myself. A question to Irina. I sent it online, but it didn't reach us. Will you have additional times to work with proposals if the project is submitted with a BIM support? It's a parallel process. Working with a BIM model is another approach. I have a question to you from my side. If you have an opinion, if you have some comment from an expert regarding your project, if you work in ArchiCAD, how would you treat a 2D model, adding those lines inside the line or manually? There are different kind of options and comments related to different areas, for example, interdependencies with different disciplines. But there are some comments related to actually to appearance, then they're not related to the model itself. So for you, it's up to you on how you do that. If the comment is related to the model itself, and if you don't have enough time to revise them on time, at an initial stage, we would allow you to be delayed, because it's a pilot project and we still have some time to understand our rules of cooperation and try to be understood. Dear colleagues, this is the minute of fame for our speakers. And now we have a 45-minute break. In the first floor, there is a coffee break for networking.